Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So in the last chapter, we talked about how differences in the workers and their education and training costs and these sorts of things can create internal labor markets within firms where they pay workers differently. Now we're going to continue that thread in this chapter. So now what we're going to do is explore how individual firms use compensation strategies to try to increase their productivity, minimize costs, and ultimately maximize their profits. So personnel economics can help us understand why and how various employment arrangements occur in the labor market. Now that we've gone through a lot of the setup with economic theory earlier on in the course, we're really getting into the sort of topics that should be useful for someone going into or continuing their career in human resources. We're going to be applying the tools and concepts we've learned so far to the decisions that HR managers are forced to make. Hopefully, the sorts of stuff in this chapter and the next couple chapters are going to provide some skills to make better decisions in this area. So think back to the Cobb-Douglas production function we had before, where a firm's output is partially determined by the amount of labor or the number of workers that they choose to hire. All right, remember that was the L term that we were working with. Now, throughout this course, we've been measuring either the number of workers or the number of hours worked, that was our labor input. And this is good to use for a simple analysis. It's fine for a lot of those purposes. But in the real world, the quantity of workers, the number of hours worked, isn't everything. Workers need to know what they're doing at their job. So it's easy to imagine adding an additional worker who knows nothing, and they end up reducing the output that the team is able to do because of the problems they cause. Many of us have had to deal with coworkers like that make things worse or serve as a distraction. So the quality of workers also matter, not just the quantity. Some of the quality is going to be a result of the human capital formation that we talked about before. So building the skills necessary to succeed within a job or within a particular industry. Some of this is going to be a result of effort. So we can define effort in a few ways. It could be the amount produced or the number of tasks completed. In simple production, it can be measured directly or very easily estimated. For like knowledge workers, this could be a lot more difficult. Or for workers that work as a part of a team, it can be very difficult to determine who exactly contributes to what. So we can also measure by how quickly a worker performs a given task or a set of given tasks. Effort is also related to the care or attention to detail. So Homer Simpson, as your textbook points out, is a great example of a worker with low attention to detail. For customer-facing roles, effort will also involve how they treat the customer and how proactive they are with dealing with them and anticipating the problems that they may have. So we instinctively know effort when we see it, but there are a lot of different dimensions of effort depending on the job and its characteristics and how we want to try to measure effort. Now, once we introduce the concept of effort, we need to consider the principal agent problem. So the principal agent problem describes a situation where there's conflict in priorities between a group or a person and their representative authorized to act on their behalf. So the principal hires the agent to act on their behalf, to further their goals, but the agent also has their own personal goals. And when these two goals are in conflict, bad things can happen. So basically what's going on here in the principal agent problem is there's a separation of ownership and control. So someone owns the assets, owns the company, they hire someone to try to act on their behalf. So the owner is still bearing the risk of losses in this case. It's not the agent who bears the risk of the losses, but it's the agent who's making the decisions. So in our case, for what we're looking at, the principal is going to be the employer and the agent is going to be the worker. So the principal, in this case, the firm or the management, they want to maximize their profit, but the agent, the worker, typically wants to minimize their own effort. So both of these have sides, the principal and the agent. They have their own priorities that don't always coincide. So what the management wants workers to do, workers don't always want to do that. Right? This is going to create conflict where both parties want different things. So as a result, owners and managers need to find a way to motivate workers to put forth more effort. So meeting their interests instead of meeting the workers' interests, which is typically going to be, trying to put in the least amount of effort possible to get the job done. I think all of us who work know instinctively that we try, to minimize our own effort in a lot of cases. It's a natural tendency that we all do. So now in economics, we typically refer to the production process as a black box. It's a way for us to not have to worry about the nitty-gritty details of, the actual management of a firm, so we can focus on the broader economic issues that we're interested in. Sometimes it's going to be necessary, like in this course, some of the things we talked about earlier on, because models need simplifications to make them possible to work with. So when we worked with the supply and demand model in the labor market, we were abstracting away a lot of, of the nitty-gritty details, so we could understand just the effect of changing supply or demand, or what are the things that affect supply and demand. If we consider every single problem, it's like using a life-size map. It's perfectly accurate, but it's going to end up being useless to use. But now we're focusing on some of those abstractions, some of the details within the actual management of a firm. So we're going to open up the black box and look inside to try to understand what's going on. So this is going to be equal parts economics, management, and human resources, a combination of different disciplines. So why do firms exist? The economist Ronald Coase said it was because of transaction costs, that it's much easier and more efficient to hire someone to work for you for a long period of time than it is for a firm to go out and hire you when they want you to do a specific job. And for every different task, hire a different person, or continually negotiating contracts with you for all those different tasks. If every single person in the economy was an independent contractor coming together to only work on a single job, we would waste a lot of time and money trying to find those people and trying to negotiate contracts and things like that. Much easier to just have people work for a firm, sign those long-term contracts. Armin Alchin and Harold Demsetz said, no, that wasn't it. It's because we need a manager to oversee and coordinate team production. It's just an individual working on their own. It's much easier for them to figure out what to do and to know exactly if they're shirking, if they're putting in the full effort or just relying, well, I guess in this case, just relying on themselves. When there's team production, you can shirk and rely on other people, and it's more difficult to tell. So we have a manager at the firm to oversee the workers within the firm, make sure they're all, pulling their own weight. Both of these definitions are going to be useful for us, especially in this chapter. Another question is, why do jobs exist? The standard neoclassical economic theory suggests that workers are going to get paid their marginal revenue product. So what you make for the firm is what you get paid. Highly productive workers are going to get paid a lot, and less productive workers are going to be paid very little. But this misses some of the realities. A rocket scientist with no education or training isn't going to be very productive and have a low marginal revenue product and make a low salary according to neoclassical theory. But in reality, we know that they would never get hired in the first place. It's not worth it to the firm to hire someone at such a low level productivity with that low background knowledge. Now, Ronald Coase would say that jobs are efficient ways to bundle the tasks that are needed in production, lower transaction costs and all that. Demsetz and Alchin focus on the oversight of workers, something that gets at the principal agent problem that we're going to be focusing on. And now different roles within the firms are paid differently. Some of that difference is a result of different levels of productivity for each worker. So, what we see with neoclassical theory. Some of it's going to be things like compensating differentials. We talked about that before. So, for instance, sales staff is going to get paid commission to encourage more effort. Senior management might get paid a large base salary, but they're going to be expected to work long hours whenever needed, while assembly line workers are going to get paid overtime for any time they do extra work. Sometimes there's different characteristics of the job, again, getting back to the compensating differentials, that are going to, you're going to need to pay workers more because of the difficulties of the job. All right, so we'll start off our analysis of the production process and firm management with how compensation design can improve or hinder effort. So here we have figure 11.1. It shows the principal agent problem graphically, because of course in economics we have a graph for everything. So the curves U1, U2, and U3 represent utility curves for workers, or indifference curves. Remember, utility is the total satisfaction or benefit that's derived from an activity. We can think of utility as similar to job satisfaction in this case. Now, of course, we get utility from our purchases, but we also get them from any activity we do, even outside of market context. So in this case, what we're doing is comparing the trade-off between effort and wages. So workers derive utility from both monetary and non-monetary aspects of the job. Here we're only considering two aspects of the job, the wage and effort, but obviously there's a lot more dimensions from which workers derive utility from work. But again, to keep it simple, and so we can work with a graph, we're just going to look at wage and effort. So we consider effort as something that causes negative utility. We'd rather relax than put forth effort at work. Now, this may not be 100% true for all workers. Many of us enjoy some parts of our job and are more than happy to do it. Max Weber's Protestant work ethic suggests that some people enjoy working just for work's sake, to keep themselves busy and to do something valuable. But others are able to find a job where some aspect is rewarding, whether it's pro athletes and entertainers or normal people who find a job that they find interesting or they think the goal is worthy. But in general, working harder is not enjoyable because you need a reason to do it. Because of the negative utility of effort, the curve ends up with a positive slope. So U3 is going to be the indifference curve with the highest utility, and U1 is the curve at the lowest level of utility. So let's say that the required effort at a firm for an individual worker increases from the point E1 to E2, but the worker's wage stays the same at W1. So the worker is going to move from point A to point C, so move from the indifference curve U2 to U1. They're going to stay at that initial wage, but they have to increase their effort. So they're going to move, like I said, from the difference curve U2 to U1. That's going to lower their utility. If they wanted to maintain the same level of utility, they would have to earn a higher wage. So in this case, to stay on that indifference curve, if they're going to be putting forth the effort E2, they're going to have to move all the way up to wage W2. So increase the wage, in this case, pretty substantial. The implications of this model should be intuitive for all of us. We'd all prefer a job with a high salary and a low level of effort to one with really high effort and low pay. When workers make a decision to accept a job, they consider in their decision-making process both the compensation and the expected job characters. So they're looking at a combination of both of those. They're not just looking at salary. Now, there's going to be a wide production process between firms. There's going to be variation between them. There can be pretty significant differences, even between firms in the same industry. So we would expect effort to vary between firms, and likewise the pay to vary between firms. So a long time ago, Henry Ford paid much higher wages and offered a shorter work week than pretty much all his competitors when he first instituted the assembly line, because it made work much less enjoyable. So he had to pay more to get people to be willing to work on his assembly lines, and he had to cut down the hours because of the extra effort they had to expend working on the assembly line versus doing small team batch productions of automobiles. If you ever worked on the assembly line, this would make sense to you. I did 40 hours 1 week on the assembly line of my summer job in college, and it was absolutely miserable. Another example is a janitor working for one firm. They may earn more as a compensating differential for their increased effort being required compared to a janitor working at another firm. Now, it might be difficult or impossible to test this empirically, just looking at statistics, but a quick observation of the daily job tasks between these two janitors could make this point pretty obvious. Now, the negative utility from effort presents an issue for firms who are trying to maximize profits. They want to maximize profits, but the individual workers, they want to work as little as possible, put forth as little effort as possible. So firms will be able to earn more with greater effort from their employees, but employees are trying to minimize their effort. So this is our principal agent problem. We have management who wants them to put forth more effort, workers who want to put forth less effort. So employees are incentivized to shirk or to try to shirk on the job, to put in less effort than is necessary. So to try to move themselves from point C back to point A. And this is going to be true, and workers will do this when effort isn't easily observable. If you can't tell just how much effort the worker is putting in, then it's easier for them to shirk and to get away with it.